dynamic routes in Next.js. This video is going to cover exactly what they are, how they work, and then we're going to cover some different things regarding them with generateStaticPaths, catch-all segments, optional catch-all segments, and different things like that. And not only are we going to do a conceptual review kind of using the actual Next.js documentation, but we are also going to build a demo application which we make requests to an actual API to show you how this would work in more of a real-world situation. So first off, dynamic routes. When you don't know what you want your route to be ahead of time, so / whatever, you don't know that / whatever ahead of time, this is where you can use dynamic routes. And you can use dynamic segments that are filled in at request time or pre-rendered at build time. And you can pre-render these routes or segments at build time using generateStaticPaths, which we'll show you an example of and cover here in just a second. So the convention for making these dynamic routes in your application. So in a typical Next.js app, you create a route by creating a folder. And then to make that route public, you create a page.js or tsx or JSX file within that folder to make that route publicly accessible. So if you create a folder called dashboard and put a page.js file within that dashboard folder, that automatically creates a route within your application / dashboard that someone can access. And you'll show the UI for what you return in your page.js file. But if you need to do these routes dynamically, so maybe you want to show a product. So maybe you have a products page, and then when they click on a product, you want to show / products / whatever that product ID is and show that product. Well, you need to generate that dynamically. So to do this, a dynamic segment can be created by wrapping a folder's name in square brackets. So you would do left bracket, folder name, right bracket. For example, ID or slug. Dynamic segments are passed as the params prop to layout, page, route, and generate metadata functions. So, for example, a blog could include the following URL: app /blog / slug. So the specific blog post that you kind of want to see, where slug is the dynamic segment for blog posts. And when you go to this slug route right here, then you'll be able to access that slug within your params passed in as a prop to this page function here. And then you could generate your blog post by using that param. And in these examples right here, I'll zoom on this a little bit more. You can see app /blog / slug. If you go to a URL that is blog /a, then the param that is going to be passed right here is going to be slug :a. Because you named this slug right here, so your param that's passed is going to be translated to a property that contains the name slug. And then since you went to the URL path of /a, it's going to pass a as your param. So then you could go get your slug that has the kind of ID of a. And then if you went to the URL of b, then your slug is going to be b. And if you went to the URL of blog /c, your slug is going to be c. And if this was titled ID right here, then in your params, in this params object, the property wouldn't be called slug. It would be called ID. So whatever you name this folder is what is going to be passed as your params. And the value of that param property there is going to be whatever you go to as a URL there. All right. And then you also have this generate static params function. So this can be used to generate these dynamic routes at build time instead of request time. So when you build your application, if you use this function, you can build out all of your potential dynamic routes ahead of time so that in your application, when you go to that route, well, you've already kind of pre-rendered that page. You just need to fill in some of that dynamic data of the particular post or the ID. So this can help speed up your application by generating these dynamic routes here. It also automatically dedupes these fetch requests. And as it mentions, if you use a fetch request within generate static params like it does here, it is automatically deduped. And it means a fetch request with the same arguments across multiple generate static params layout, pages will be only made once to decrease your build times. And I'll show you an example of this here in just a sec, because this is maybe a little bit trickier here. And then you can use catch all segments. So instead of just doing square bracket, folder name square bracket, if you use the like 3-dot operator, the spread operator, this will be a catch all segment. So for example, instead of just going to this / and then an ID and seeing the blog post for that ID, you could do / square bracket ... slug or ... ID, and that will match multiple dynamic parameters there. In which, in this example, if you see app / shop / square bracket ... slug, that will match shop / close, but it also matches / close / tops / close tops t-shirts, and so on. So maybe you give the option for your user experience to where they could generate potentially a dynamic path of just to see the tops, but on that page, maybe they also select to see the t-shirts as well. So then maybe they filter in the t-shirts and you do / t-shirts, and you use this kind of catch-all to show the tops and t-shirts in the same page. If this is a little confusing right now, I totally get it. I'll show you an example of this, and I think it'll make much more sense. And then moving downward here more, you have optional catch-all segments. So we had catch-all segments here, and then you can make these optional. You do this by adding, instead of just left square bracket, right square bracket, use 2 left square brackets, 2 right square brackets. So you use double square brackets. And the difference between catch-all and optional catch-all segments is that with optional, the route without the parameter is also matched. So right here in this example for app / shop, and then if you use the optional catch-all, so the double square bracket slug, it means that when you go to this URL path here, this is also going to match / shop, in addition to shop / close / tops, so on and so forth. But if you just use the single catch-all with the single square brackets, not the optional catch-all, then shop is not going to be matched here. So maybe in your shop page, you want to allow them to be able to like filter in your tops and t-shirts and stuff like that, but you still want them to see the shop. Well, if you still wanted them to see the entire shop plus what they filter for maybe below, then you might use an optional catch-all segment to where if you didn't want that, you want them to filter things in and you don't want to see the shop anymore, you just see what they selected, then you would use just the catch-all segments. Okay, so different kind of use cases there for these 2 different ways, but that is basically dynamic routes in a nutshell there. But let's go ahead and now build an actual demo application where we make requests to an API, and you can actually see how these work in practice here. So let's go over to VS Code. So here within VS Code, I'm going to do npx create next app latest, and we're going to just create a template next app. We're going to call this one dynamic routes. No, I do not want to do TypeScript or ESLint or Tailwind or use an SRC directory, but I will use the app router, and I do not want them to mess with my import aliases here. So I've created this, and now I'm just going to do file, open, and open this project here. So now I just opened this project up here within VS Code, and I'm going to exit out of all this stuff here. So let's go ahead, and the API that we're going to use is going to be a products API. We're going to get a list of products. So all we're going to do here to show you how this works is we're going to create a products page to list out the products returned from that API. And then we're going to create a product page. And when we click on a product, we're going to want to generate a dynamic URL that goes and visits that single product page. Okay, so let's get started here. So within my app folder, I'm going to do a new folder. We're going to call this products. And within my products folder, we're going to add a new page called page.jsx. I'm going to export a default function. If I could spell function, and I'm going to go with products. And then what are we going to do here? Well, we are going to need to make our request to get our products, but let's first here just return maybe a fragment, and we're just going to do an H1 and do products, just so we make sure that we have this page set up. And I'm going to make sure to run my server here. So I'm going to do npm run dev. So I'm running my products page here. And if I go back to not the Next.js docs, but localhost 3000 here, you see I have a just blanket Next.js application. And then if I go to / products here, you see I do indeed get my products. So we have this, but now we need to get some demo data from an API. So we're going to use this API here. It's called dummyjson.com, and we're going to use their products here. So to get all the products, all we're going to do is hit this, but we don't want all of their products. We only want like maybe the first 10 or so. So the way that we can do this is we can set a limit of 10, and to specify the fields that we want, I think we just want title, description, and price. So we're going to add that as well. So I'm going to copy this here, head back to VS Code, close my terminal, and we're going to create a function here. And this is going to be an async function called get products. And I'm going to paste this, but we're going to do this a little bit differently. So we're going to say const res is equal to await, and then we're going to fetch all this data, but we're not going to use a skip here. So we're going to remove that query parameter, and we're going to do title. Actually, I think title and price is fine. We're not really worried too much about like how the UI looks here. We're more so worried about how dynamic routes work. So title and price, we'll just get those from this API. If you yourself, you want to play around with getting the image and description and other stuff, you can do that as well. But title and price, I think that will be just fine for our use case. And then I'm going to remove those .thens here. So after I get my result here, then I need to get my data, which is going to be awaiting res.json. And then I believe this API is going to return an object that has a products property that is going to be an array of products. So I'm going to actually return data.products here. And I think that should be correct. And then all I need to do here is make this products component an async function. And I'm going to say const products is equal to await, calling my get products function. And then let's just console log my products here. And then since this isn't a client component, this is actually going to run in Node.js, which is going to show up in my terminal down here instead of in my console. So if I go back here and I go to my products page, if I refresh, it refreshed. So I didn't throw an error. So that is good. And speaking to errors, I'm not handling errors here. We'll handle that once we get to the data portion of, or the data fetching portion of Next.js. But right now, I'm not really going to worry about it. So it looks like I do indeed get my products here, and you can see it is a list of products returned from this API with an ID, title, and price. So now we need to render these out. And to do this, I think it makes sense here to create a products component to render out, or a product component to render all these out. So I'm going to create a new folder. I'm going to just do components. And since I'm not adding a page.js file within this components folder, it's not going to create a publicly accessible route here. So I'm just going to do product.jsx, and I'm going to do export default function product. It's going to take an ID, a title. Actually, I don't think I need to use the ID. So I'm not going to. I'm just going to do title and price. And this is going to be super simple here. All we're going to do is return a div that has a h4 of title and then an h6 of price. And it might be better to actually just use a p tag here because it's not really a header. So we're going to do that instead. If I can remove that emoji pop up. So we're just going to render out the title and the price. And we're going to add just a couple of styles to this just to make them stand out from each other a little bit more. Let's just add a border, an ugly little border, 1 pixel, solid white. And then let's also just give them some margin of 20 pixels. And to stand out from the border a little bit more, let's also do a padding of 20 pixels. I don't necessarily recommend inline styles, but for the sake of making this tutorial mainly focused on dynamic routes, let's go ahead and just do that there. So I have my product function, and then all I need to do here is I'm going to say if my products.length is greater than 0, then I'm going to render out my products. So I'm going to say products.length is greater than 0. And then I'm going to render out my products.map. And I'm going to get the ID, title, and price from every product. And what am I going to return? I'm going to return a product component here. And I'm going to set the key to this component since I'm mapping over these products here. And then I'm going to set price is equal to price. So we are getting our products from this API here. We are returning them here. We're getting them here. And also, since this is a server component, I don't need to use a use effect call or anything like that. I just can use this right within a server component here. I can fetch it all here. I can just await it right here. And that is going to work just fine. Hopefully, unless I mess it up, we'll find out in a second. But I don't need to like manage any state or anything like that, which is super nice, let me tell you. So let's go back here. And hey, I have all of my products here rendered out on my products page. And yeah, you could see them all here. We probably didn't need to do so many products. Let's actually change this and let's just do 5 products so it looks a little bit better. So yeah, back down to 5 products. So I think this looks good. This is a great, good looking products page here. So with that, what I want to do is every time we click on a product, we then are navigated to products / and then the ID of that product. And then we show just a product page. So how can we do this? Well, what we need to do this is I need to add some way to navigate to a product here, but I don't necessarily want to add just like, so to add this client side navigation, I'm going to have to make this, or I'm going to have to use some sort of client component, but I don't want to just make this entire products page here a client component. So I think it's going to be better if I make like a product nav button. You could think about a better name, but in my components folder, make that a client component to handle my navigation here. And then just render that out. Like maybe I could render it probably within my product here. So I'll render that out like right here. And then that means I will actually use the ID here and I will pass that alongside here as well. So let's go ahead and we're about to write a lot of code here and hopefully I don't mess anything up. So within my components, I'm going to add a new component and I'm going to just say product button.jsx. And this is going to be a client component because we're going to perform client side navigation within this component. So I need to make this a client component using use client. So what I also need to do is I need to import use router from next router here. And then I need to export default function product button. And then my product button, it's going to get an ID. It's going to get the product ID. And then what I'm going to do is I'm just going to return a regular old button saying go to product, but on click, I'm going to say handle click. I'm going to call my handle click function, which I'm going to create up here. Function handle click. And what we're going to do here is we're going to now use our router. So we need to use our use router hook. So I'm going to say const router is equal to use router, and we're going to call that. And then on this click here, we're going to say router dot push, and I'm going to use a template string here, and we're going to go to products / and then whatever the ID of my product is. So ID. Okay, so we created a product button that it's just going to be a button that when clicked, it's going to push to the route / products / ID. And as you can see, this is a dynamic route here because the ID is going to be dynamic. It's going to be changing for every product that we use here. Okay, and I decided to just make this a client component because I didn't want to make my entire products page a client component, nor do I want to make my entire product a client component here. So to use this, I should be able to just do product button, render that out here, and set my ID is equal to my product ID right here. So if I go back here, do you see that I get an error, and I know exactly what this error is because I've made it several times before. So let's go back. Instead of importing use router from next router, it actually needs to be next navigation. I think I made this in my last tutorial that I made as well. One of these days I'll learn. So if I do next navigation, I should see now that everything works as expected. So I have this go to product button, and we need to have cursor pointer on this button. How is this a button if we don't do that? So I'm going to just do cursor pointer there just to adjust that a little bit. Great. So theoretically, when I click on this, it will navigate to this route, but it should break because I don't have that route yet. So now we need to go create this dynamic route. So let's head back to my products page here. Okay. And now we need to make it so when I click on that, we don't get an error. So the way that we can do this is within my products folder here, because I want it to be products / whatever my dynamic route is. We need to add a folder, and to make this a dynamic route, we need to use square brackets here. So I'm going to just do square bracket ID. Okay. And then I'm going to add a page.jsx file here. And this is going to be our single product. So I'm going to export a default function called product, and it's going to be passed a params object. And then we're going to return a single product here. But before we do this, let's just do an H1 and call this product. And then let's also just console log our params here. Okay. So now when I navigate to a certain ID, I should be able to see my params console logged, and I should just see an H1 with product. Nothing is dynamic here at this point. So if I come to here, I'm going to see that I don't have anything right now on except for my product, which am I still console logging my products? Yeah, I am. I don't need to do that anymore. I'm pretty confident that that is working correctly. So let's go back to my page and then back here. And then if I go /1, I should see product, and I do see that. And if I come back, you see my params is ID of 1. Okay, so when I navigate to this dynamic route segment here, using the square brackets, I get my params, which is the end of my URL here. /1 is going to pass a param of 1. /2, if I go back here, it's going to pass a params of 2. So now I can use this param to make a request to that API again to get the specific product for this parameter. Okay. And we also need to talk about generating static paths. And we could do that now. So let's go ahead and just do that now. So let's go back, and I need to do something to the effect of this. So I'm going to copy this, and we're going to keep this right in this product folder. I tend to like to co-locate everything as much as possible here. So we're going to export an async function, generateStaticPaths. And this is where we're going to generate all of our potential dynamic routes at build time. So then we just need to fill in these routes with the data dynamically once the user requests for them. So it will already be pre-rendered, and this also helps with deduping and stuff like this. So with this, we want to call this an ID, and this isn't going to be a post here, and this is going to be the incorrect API request as well. So what we're going to do here instead is we're going to go back to our API. We're going to look, how do we get just a single, and as you can see, I'm into watches. So it's showing me a bunch of watches here. Man, did those look good. But here, this is how we get a single product. We go to /products/ and then whatever the product is, and we'll return just a single product for that. So I'm going to actually just copy this URL here, head back, and instead of fetching to this posts, we're going to fetch to this URL. Actually, that's not what I want to do. I want to actually do my same fetch request that we did earlier. So we want to do this request right here. And since it's automatically deduped, we're fine to just do this request over again right here. Because the same request, Next.js is automatically going to deduplicate it and not make it multiple times. So we can just make that same request right here. And then we are going to, instead of using .then here, we're going to just say const res is equal awaiting this, and const data is going to equal await res dot JSON, and that's going to give us all of our products. So we're going to do data, and then remember it returns an object with a product property that is an array. So we're going to do data.products.map, and this is going to be product. And we should set the ID as product.id. Now, there's going to be an interesting error here, which I'll show you in just a sec. If I go back to my localhost, what you're going to see is an error of a required parameter ID was not provided as a string. It was a number. And the reason for this is because this API here, it returns the ID as a number. And right here, it expects the ID to be a string. So all I need to do to change this is coerce this number to a string. So if you run it, and I wanted to keep this in because this is something easy to run into, and it can be a little bit tricky. So here we can see we're all good now. So all this is really done here for us is it will generate these routes at build time ahead of time and speed up our application and optimize things a little bit. You technically wouldn't even need to do this. And honestly, you'd probably be just fine. But just wanted to show you how that works. So with this, we're still going to get our same kind of parameters here. And now what we need to do is use that API to get a single product. So we're going to just use function get product, and we're going to pass an ID to it. And we're then going to say const res is going to equal await. We're going to make another request to our API here. So let's go back. And to get a single product, we need to do this here. And I'm going to paste that in there. But instead of just hard coding /1, we need to do $ID. And I also need to make this backticks here. And I also need to make this an async function. So I'm going to do async function get product. We're going to get that. Then we need to convert it. Data is equal to res dot res.json, and I need to make sure to await my res.json. And then I'm going to return my data here. And then I have my params ID here. So all I need to do is say const product is equal to await. And I need to make this an async function. All I need to do is await my get product function, and I need to pass in my params.id. And then I'm going to console log my product. And we're going to see if all that code I wrote there caused an error or not. So I refresh this page. I should technically, since I'm on /2, I should get product, the second product from this API. So if we go back, if we look at this, you see my product has an ID of 2, and it returns the title, the description, and the price. So now, instead of just returning in each one with product, I can just return my product component here. I'm just realizing that I have called this product and this is product. Let's actually call this product page is what I'm going to call this. And then I'm going to do my product here. And I'm going to pass in my title is going to equal my product.title. And then I'm going to say my price is equal to product.price. And it's still going to have the button here, which isn't going to make sense in this context, but we can just pass a param to remove that. So I'm going to say no button as a param. And I'm going to say no button is equal to false. But here I'm going to say not no button. So if this parameter is not set to true, I'm going to show my product button. It's a little confusing how I did that, but this should be just fine. And now we see when I go to /2 here, I'm rendering out iPhone X, $899. I'm rendering out my product here without the button. And if I go to 3, I go to Samsung Universe 9. And if I go back to my products here and I go to iPhone 9, I should see iPhone 9. If I go back to my products here, and if I go to Hawaii, I don't know how that's pronounced. I see whatever that name is right here as well. So that is how the basics of dynamic routes work. But let's do catch-all routes here, and then we'll kind of call it good for this video. So what you're going to see is, so I'm at /5 here, but what if I also want to show product number 1? Shoot, that does not work. But what if I wanted to have a page in which they could see product 1 and product 5, just both of these products? Maybe these are products that they selected. Well, to do this, we can use a catch-all route. So back to VS Code we go. And for my catch-all route here, instead of just doing square brackets, we need to use the 3 dots here. And within my page, instead of ID is just equal to this single ID here, I now need to pass an array here since it's a catch-all route. And I also need to do, so my params.id is now going to be an array of IDs. So I need to say, we should probably use promise.all here. This is going to now be IDs, and this is going to be get products, and this is going to be get products, and this is going to be products. And I'm going to say return. We're also going to do products.length is greater than 0, ampersand. Then we're going to do products.map, title, description, and ID from my products. And then we're going to return a product for all these products, in which they're going to be no button. Title is equal to title, not description. We're doing price here. price is equal to price, and I need to add a key because it is the top level product here, and that's going to be this ID. And I actually don't need to do what I did here. I can just get rid of this and move this all the way up here. And I think that that should be just fine. So where if I have my products, I'm going to return them, map over them, and return a product for every product because I'm making this a catch-all route here. And then instead of just getting my single product here, what I need to do is I need to say const promises is going to equal an empty array. I'm going to say for const ID of IDs. I'm going to loop over these. And then for everyone, I'm going to say const res is equal to, we are going to fetch the ID right here. We're going to push that to our promises array because we don't want to await right here and create like a waterfall effect to where we make one request, then the next one, then the next one. We want to use promise.all here. So then I'm going to say const data. Yeah, maybe data is equal to promise.all. I'm going to pass in my promises. I want to do promise.all again. And I want to await this. I want to return await promise.all. And I'm going to do my data.map D for one data point, and then call .json on that. I think this works. I'm not 100% sure. So let's go back, and promises is not a function. You're right. It is not a function. Let's actually push our res to promises here. And we go back and see what we have here. I didn't mess it up. So now, since we have our catch-all route here, let's go back here. So products, I can still go to a single product here. But now that this is a catch-all route, if I want to see multiple products, I can do /3. And you see I generate that here because in my code, now I'm going to get all of my IDs passed as params here. Then I'm going to get my products. I'm going to loop over all of my IDs, make those requests, do my promise.all magic, and work some magic there. So that looks all good. And then I should be able to add like 5 in here as well. And that adds it as well. So that is dynamic routes in Next.js. I know it's quite a bit, but that should show you how everything works there. Next up, we're going to get into loading UI and streaming, error handling, which I mentioned I would get to, so I'm going to keep my promise, and much more Next.js stuff. So thanks for tuning into this, and I'll see you in that next one.